There we go. It says that we are live. And I'd like to welcome everybody into America Disclosing Uncensored. Today's guest is Maria Wheatley, a teacher, a lecturer, an author of many books. I believe you're up to 10, 9 or 10.
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Awesome. I have so many things laying on the floor behind me that I just need to walk away from the microphone doing shows to kind of put things together that I've been working on since I've been 15. I'm 65 now, so it's 50 years of a lot of different scenarios of things. I wish I had the time or could have put myself in that place. But back to you, because you're the important one here, and I'm honored to have you here. You've traveled all over. You started at a very young age. You have an important parent that was in the world, that was doing things that probably gave you great influences, and you're now trying to discover all the ancient secrets of why, the questions to why, because we always seem to end up that way somehow. But again, thank you for being here, and I am so grateful to have you. uh, I think I heard people say that if anybody wants the answer in the UK, you need to go to Maria Wheatley. And that's why I'm here coming to you. So, again, welcome. And I want to start off by just asking you, because I know you are a person that thinks out of the box in many good places that bring us back to certain scenarios. Where are we looking at, or have you found any indication that the ancients, these ancient engineers and people that would move stones hundreds of miles to bring special types of stones to certain places of frequencies and things like that, that they were being taught by something else, or they just had good gut instinct of what Mother Earth stood for to accompany them in their life's journeys? How do you feel about that scenario of it?
In my research looking into ancient civilizations, as much as ancient sites such as Stonehenge in Egypt that need no introduction, what I found was, by looking at the bodies of the peoples of the past and especially their skulls, then in England in the Neolithic period, that's about 5,500 years ago, and stretching back even 8,000 years ago, they had elongated skulls. And I think that their ear bone placements and the anthropological reports that I read and handed over to a doctor, a physician at one of London's top hospitals, and asked about could they interpret that particular description of their inner ear. And it seems that if it's correct, those reports, which I don't see why they wouldn't be, they had a different ear kind of sensation, frequencies listening to than us. So I think possibly that these ancient civilizations, the elongated skulled people, could maybe hear earth frequencies and even the sounds emitted by stones. In one of my experiments with Rodney Hale, I looked at the energy bands. If you imagine a standing stone emits energy at certain points, and we used some electromagnetic sensing equipment, electrical devices, and ionization equipment, and it was the stones do emit frequencies where I can douse them with a dowsing rod, for example. So perhaps their experience was completely different to our visual and sensing that we have at ancient sites today.
Wow. Is there a possibility of maybe because that why factor or what if factor that people utilize in their verbiage, including me, could the ley lines have moved a little bit, and things like that throw us off, because they do throw curves from what you've taught me?
Well, the lace, some of the lace seem to be very stable. I mean, it was noted back in the 1980s with some top British dowsers who followed a ley and the earth currents that entwine it. So imagine that a major ley has two earth currents entwining it, a bit like the caduceus symbol or a strand of DNA. That's a major ley system, and they seem very stable. Sometimes they can go awry, but it's almost like they've been anchored in, like an acupuncture needle into a meridian line thousands and thousands of years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. So when you mentioned DNA, and in a way, I look at Mother Earth having its own identity of a double helix, kind of like male female scenario of how things work. Am I looking at when I think that way wrongfully, or am I looking at that in a correct perspective?
Well, how I see it is with these different types of earth currents, they can be male or female. And sometimes, intriguingly, if an ancient site is close to two vortexes or vortices, depending on, how one says that, if it's close to two vortexes, then you have an energy line born of those two currents, which has been documented for many years now. And that's a hermaphrodite line. So sometimes we think of male and female, and sometimes we think of co-joined energy lines. And when we measured the vortex points, they were in a cycle like 10 hertz, 20 hertz, 30 hertz, 40 hertz, and then go back to 10 hertz. So a lot of infrasound rather coming out through these energy points and portals as well.
Interesting. And could that be why this goes off a little bit of when we talk about megalithic structures and things like that, but we hear about portals and uh, Earth's ability to create these areas of vastness right in front of our eyes, and then people report seeing strange lights over certain of these places or certain objects in the skies. I did a show with Mark Ollie on some of his investigative work, and he was phenomenal trying to give me the explanation of it, and actually giving me some information that he felt that correlated to it. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's part of why we see or there's a passage of something that has that ability um, as a naturalization of this planet that can create this of a vastness of what we're not sure of, but it's there?
Exactly. I mean, I did a TV show with the UFO hunters on vortexes and Stonehenge many years ago. And what an ancient site has that attracts earthlights, skylights, and even different types of people to the site, so maybe even celestial ETs. What they all have is not just one thing. So there's always normally like a crossing of lays. Then you have an energy vortex, then you have very, very deep underground water and aquifer, then you have earth currents and lots of other things. That makes a power center. So if you have one thing after another, and a British aerospace engineer who also worked for Rolls-Royce, that's a very prestigious airplane company in the UK, he noticed and logged all of the UFO sightings around Stonehenge over a period of, I think it was 10 years. It may have been 20. And he noticed two corridors, one going east-west and one going north-south. So there was these two corridors, one going to the north of England, one going east-west, and Stonehenge was right in the middle. And that's where you had the most activity, not just at Stonehenge, but along the north-south line and the east-west line, because it was a power place that seems to attract this. And he documented UFO after UFO sighting in clusters as well as in singularity.
Very interesting. So in a way, I look at this as this phenomena could have been participating and to early humanity, the ancients, to reflect and build in certain areas because they may have been actually like us in ways experience these things that we collect data on now, as you said that your friend did by utilizing and taking case reports and so forth and on that data. So do you think that I know this is out of the box and it may be kind of a Cornish question, but I like to think into the some of the unknowns that maybe people aren't bringing up. So by trying to do that, I guess what I'm saying is, would we try to like focus a point of thought that wherever these are, people followed in suit in search of something beyond what they had as a civilization looking for something bigger in the universe?
I think it's a lot of things, really. I personally feel that the ancient civilizations, the elongated skull, and the later, much taller people that have been documented and their aDNA has been looked at in depth recently, I think they were highly intelligent. They were skilled engineers. They were vast astronomers. They were geomancers. They knew about the lays. They knew about the earth currents. So I see an ancient civilization that is skilled, also mathematically. They were mathematicians, because even if we take a feature from Stonehenge, for example, 4 stones called the station stones, they align precisely to the moon's most northerly moonrise that only happens every 18.61 years. Is happening now and next year. And it also would align to the rising of the sun at midsummer and the setting of the southerly most moonrise, again, that only happens every 18.61 years now, and we're in that this year and next. So all of those alignments in 4 stones alone. But if you did and if you imagine them, they're in a rectangular shape, and you do a huge line down the middle, like crossing it to create 2 triangles. Well, those 2 triangles are perfect Pythagorean triangles, 2,000 years before Pythagoras even discovered that triangle. So it's a complicated society, and maybe they attracted the activity because of their ancient civilizations were so high res and so skillful. Maybe that was more of an attraction. And even if that happened, they could have met up, whereas we don't. Even if there's UFO activity going around today, most people don't interact with them in terms of their civilization. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think ancient civilizations could have attracted that through their high intelligence.
Yeah, I do. And I think, we may not give them enough credit for what the abilities truly were. Of so much Earth is on top of Earth, of where answers lie that we cannot see. And then you have the science end that, well, I don't know if you really want to call it the science end, but we have the governmental and the militarial and no can when it comes to things that we want to do on the scientific side to unearth more productivity that could present better answers to things. So we have to look at where the visual sites lie, what's in front of us, And I think there's a commonality in many ways of many things that do this. The one part I don't understand, I try to, theoretically I do, because dowsing was something that always kind of like stuck to me. And I'd like to go there for a minute with you. Your father was a very remarkable person who got you into a very early age of this love that you have. And you have probably exceeded all his expectations. And I'm sure he has a deep love continuing for you within that and seeing your successes. But when we look at these things that happen and how we weigh them by what we understand, is there a correct logic of balance that we can use? Because a lot of people say, I want to be able to dowse. Is there a simple way? I guess my question to you is that for people that want to learn more, that maybe I can also help push to your workshops that you provide for people to learn more on, because I will do that. I'll write some things and put in my little articles out there to do that. But is there any more simplified ways? Because I know I made some of mine and I had some remarkable things happen with them. And I want to also ask you about John Burke. Because I know he had a whole different theory of how he did it. And the funny part about it is I own one of the Burke family mountaintops where I have a wood shop up there. I call it my download frequency. I can look at something and I think about it, and the next day I see something in it and I create it. And it's kind of like odd, but I used to talk to Ken and his brother John, who said that they had relatives that were over in your part of the world, and they came here. They lived by dowsing. They would not grow corn in a certain area. They would not have their animals in a certain area. It was like somebody was teaching them, and they used to talk to me about it, and they were a big influence in my life. But Ken mostly was here in the Americas, in the Pennsylvania area, which is close to New Hampshire,
Yeah.
our friend Dennis's place. But
Yeah. Yes.
so is there a simple way that would make any sense to somebody if they wanted to participate and start to learn about that more?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, I got taught by master dowsers, such as my late father, Chinese geomants, Italian master dowsers. I'm quite internationally taught. So I can, pass on all of that information to any one of my students. So I haven't just learned one way. I've learned how they do it in ancient China through Chinese geomants and in Europe. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to say people can learn with me. I'm going to be having some video classes soon, or they can join me on Zoom lessons. But I too have studied John Burke's books, and dare I say it, and hopefully not be burnt at the stake, but I think I've taken his work to the next level, because I always agreed with the way he charged seeds. So my latest book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, I've looked at how you charge seeds, because I think he was right for the wrong reason. He would put them inside of chambers, but I look at the earth energies, and if you put them on earth energies, that some of which can be found inside of chambers, that's what's charging the stones. And if you charge them by a timing system, and I think I've got the timing system, and that's 6 to 7 days after a new or full moon, that's when earth energies change a rotation. If they're a spiral pattern, they change in the other way. But what's going on in the skies above is the sun is square the moon, and it shoots out great amounts of planetary magnetism. And I think it's that planetary magnetism that can charge the seeds up. And in my experiments, same as John Burke's, they grow faster and straighter. And if you withdraw water from the seedlings in a hot period in the summer, they seem to be far more robust. Then in my legacy inheritance from other master dowsers, I looked at where the ancients were planting foods, and such as wheat, which was ember then, it was called ember, and various other agricultural products, and they followed a template. They were doing it time and time again in the late Bronze Age here in the UK. So I looked at that template and decoded it in the land, and they were utilizing earth energies. So they knew which earth energies could promote a harvest. They knew which earth energies cattle don't like and would make them restless. And so in my book, I offer to the world how you can alternatively grow food, utilizing how to charge seeds, moving on a stage from John Burke, but more importantly, where to plant them.
Right, understood. So does the summer solstice actually have anything to do with the startup of that? Because people always, we hear about these monumentally known places that we hear that the ancient ones waited for certain signs. Was that part of the Earth's time clock at that point of how they knew when to begin that stage?
No, it wasn't the summer solstice, because it's a bit of a misnomer when we look to some ancient sites, such as Stonehenge. Everybody thinks they know Stonehenge because it's iconic and we can instantly visualize it in our mind's eye. And ever since the 1960s, since Professor Richard Atkinson wrote his book, Stonehenge, he photographed the rising sun above the heel stone. But most archaeoastronomers now know the main solar alignment at Stonehenge was to the winter solstice sunset. It's on the same axis line as the midsummer sunrise, but the most exact celestial alignment at Stonehenge is not the sun. It's the moon at its mid-swing cycle, which happens every 9 years when it rises above the tapering crest of the heel stone to the exact degree. The sun is 1 degree out.
That is so interesting. Okay, so with that said, and you having a really good understanding for that, then and you're investigating and researching things, and you're considering possibly where I go next, what is it that attracts Maria Wheatley to go somewhere?
Well, I love to try to solve a mystery, or part solve a mystery, because I don't think any one author has all of the answers. And I think each author has their own interpretation, and researchers and scholars and archaeologists alike. What I look into is the ancient civilizations and also the mysteries of stone. Why was a stone placed there? Why is the architecture like that? What is our experiences when we go into an ancient site? Why was the ancient site built in the first place? When we look to a site such as Stonehenge, ever since the 12th century, and Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing The History of the Kings of Britain, a very famous book, he said that no stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power. So I've looked into some of the healing trilithons and looked at some of the very unusual properties at Stonehenge, and it did have healing values, as well as being an oracle center, for example. So I tried to see, how did the ancients use and utilize these monuments? What were they doing there? I've looked into some of the artifacts that were found by the people that were buried outside of Stonehenge from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age, and realized that there was a priesthood, and that priesthood dressed in a certain way, looked a particular way, carried certain crystals, used certain herbs. And when we have a look at that, we begin to understand about the priesthood of the ancient past. And also what had never been discovered before around Stonehenge and numerous other sites in Britain that I've looked at, and Europe, that where people were buried, how they were buried, dictated what their job was, so to speak. Were they a shaman? Were they a high priest? Were they a ruler? Were they a king, etc.? And so I've looked into that, which other authors haven't looked into as greatly or as in depth.
Okay, interesting. So, yeah, it separates certain identities, and also, in a way, may have been used, or some may have been purposed, I guess, in my open mind of thought, as a communal gathering of certain places, where ones may have come from the wooded areas to the open vastness where these structures were, to maybe rub elbows with just certain knowledge, we'll say, to gain some of the knowledge that was being practiced by certain of the upper anarchy of people that were more privileged, that were possibly the ones that were creating some of the systems of these structures and so forth. I kind of look at it that way. I don't know if I'm wrong for doing it, but I kind of put myself in that value point of trying to figure out, because it's such an immensity of question, and you have to sacrifice sometimes the science to go into the darker area to kind of correlate what works best for one's mind, the way I look at it. And I don't know if I'm wrong. That's why I seek for, like, you and your compassion for your work and how you share it to the world. And again, you have no clue how honored I am to have you here to be able to talk about this. But yes, we hear about also med bags, and I've heard about I guess a couple years ago, maybe I heard about altar stones and different things like that. And I don't know, like, when people carry med bags, that they're doing things like they were doing in Egypt, because we've seen, or they talk about the Anunnaki had, and on some of the glyphs and things that they have representative bags also, that there was that, I mean, so far apart, but yet having so many things in common, like they were next door, but thousands of miles apart, practicing same things, and also somehow, through the vastness of all this space, being able to connect to people. So I think times that I look at are a little bit misrepresented. How do you feel about that? Because I know some things that were found in Croatia several years ago, we found, not we, but a man found, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but found in a grave gold. I mean, we had no idea that they had techniques or knowledge to create some of these really ornate pieces that they had created, as well as going in and doing excavating. The geologists there found pottery that dated back even 3,000 to 4,000 years earlier than whatever was thought. So I don't know. I'm babbling here a little bit on some of those scenarios of thought, but so do you think by chance people were coming out to learn more about spiritual healing, communal gathering places for knowledge purposes?
I think that ancient sites are multifaceted and used in different ways at different times of the year, for example. So yes, some places were an oracle place because there's ancient myths about Stonehenge and other places that say they would go there for questions, a bit like Delphi in Greece, where it'd be an oracle center. And as I've mentioned, a healing center. And I think the people of the past would have different ways of interacting with these ancient sites. For example, if they were using healing, they would go to a particular type of earth energy pattern that emits a 7 hertz frequency that puts your brain into a relaxed mode, for instance, into its alpha frequency. So different parts of an ancient site does different things. And when I looked to what the people were using in the British Isles, their favorite crystals, for example, was amber. They wore very large amber breastplates with huge pieces of amber that they had imported from Estonia, for example. So big trade with Estonia. They used a lot of jet as well. And jet came from England in Whitby Bay. But both jet and amber have electro properties. It's where we get the word electric from, is from amber, going back to ancient Greece, electra, because it will attract materials towards it. It's a bit like, when you comb your hair and it becomes static. It's a very similar principle. And it's also good for coughs and clearing and space clearing. But when the incense pots were recently analyzed, they thought it was incense and herbs, because if you imagine they carried incense pots that were very similar to how Catholics use censers in churches, when they swing it and the incense goes everywhere. Well, these were recently reanalyzed, and it was strong opiates that they were using at Stonehenge, for example. So they were in a completely different state of consciousness, we could say.
Early DMT. Wow.
Absolutely.
Very, very interesting. So you know a little bit about this. So I'm going to ask you a question that you probably will be able to inform me on. We can look at a structure or and take all the information for granted, but is there a purpose as to how one could actually enter and use it in the right way? Not just by looking at it, walking into a certain area of it, but is there a certain way of that we, or if somebody was to visit one of these sites, should address it to get the most benefit that they could, if there was something beneficial to happen for them by entering it a certain way and utilizing it a certain way? Or does everything have like a different scenario of how to do that because of how it's built?
Each ancient site rather is very unique, but let's take stone circles. Stone circles have a particular design canon. They will always have what's called a geospiral energy pattern. That's the surface pattern of a very, very deep aquifer, highly electromagnetic area, and they always have earth currents going into their entrances. That's why particular avenues flow into Avebury, particular avenues of stone, paired stones, flow into both Stonehenge and Avebury. That's on an earth current. So if you enter Stonehenge on that flowing energy and walk round where it flows, then yes, you're utilizing how our ancient ancestors probably entered that particular ancient site. But as I point out at Stonehenge, some of the features there that were noticed by the curator there of more than 25 years, he was a curator from about the 1940s to the 1960s, excluding the war years, okay, because he wasn't there then for obvious reasons. But he was constantly reporting some very strange activities at Stonehenge to do with one megalith. And he said that megalith, even in a drought, had a hole in it, and you could put your hand down about 2 feet inside of one of those massive trilithons that are in the center of Stonehenge, and it would miraculously fill with water, pure, clear water. And they didn't know where that water came from. It couldn't have fallen from the skies because sometimes it was in a drought, and it would just fill up when nobody was literally looking. And he constantly reported that, and it's been written out of all of the documentation by English Heritage. Why? Because the Ministry of Works, then the department of the government that would care for ancient sites, today it's English Heritage and the National Trust, they plugged it up with plastic and concrete, so it would no longer produce the water. So we've lost some key features from our ancient sites.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I didn't hear. I mean, I'm not going to say I didn't hear, but I don't think I ever heard that before.
No, it's in my legacy archive. You see, I've been given archives of ancient sites, surveys, engineering surveys, architecture surveys, earth energy surveys. And when I was in lockdown, I was reading through the curator's section on what I was given from the curator of Stonehenge. He was widely respected. He was so widely respected that he was invited to all of the digs of the top archaeologists, but he was disagreeing with what the archaeologists told the world and what he saw. So we were spoon-fed from people like Professor Richard Atkinson, who said, for instance, the Henge Bank was just made of chalk rubble, because all Henge monuments like Stonehenge, Avebury, I could list thousands of stone circles, they're surrounded by a chalk wall, okay? They've got a huge chalk wall that surrounds it. And Tom Gorey, that's the name of our curator, he was there watching Richard Atkinson do a dig. Richard Atkinson told the world with his authority, it's just chalk rubble. But what Tom Gorey said was it was like laser cut out, like a pudding bowl, that chalk bank, integral with the chalk bedrock. So imagine like a pudding bowl in reverse. That's how Stonehenge was made, and the stones were placed on the inside. What ancient technology was used to extract 800 feet, make a chalk wall 10 feet high? The Henge Bank that originally surrounded Stonehenge has gone. It's been ploughed out. You imagine Stonehenge, you can't see it. If you were approaching Stonehenge, you just see the tops of the stones peeking over a white chalk wall. That's what the curator saw, and he said we were being lied to.
Yeah, I think that's part of the disaster of the upper anarchy of certain people who don't want us to get all the factual findings that are truly available. But to seal up the area of the water, that's just mind blowing that they would stop something that is so special for for humanity and for us to
And
learn.
known for healing. It became known for healing. It was said that if it was rubbed on eczema, the eczema would disappear. It was said, this is an old-fashioned term, that if you had a green wound, that means, when it's slightly, you've been cut and it's a bit green, if you put the water on there, it would heal it quite fast. So people used to queue by that stone back in the day, before it was plugged up with concrete in the 1950s. And also with places like Stonehenge, there's a lot of sacred geometry there. It's not just about the earth energies, it's about looking at the sacred geometry of place that corresponds and brings its own harmonic energy. For example, if you take the outer lintel stone circle circle at Stonehenge, the one that surrounded it with all the lintels on, that was a circle. And inside of that was a bluestone circle of much smaller human-sized stones. They came from Wales, about 150 miles away, imported to Stonehenge. They're beautiful stones, highly polished. They were like a star-spangled sky, the blue stones, because they were black with white flexes, set against silver stones. You're seeing 4,500 years of erosion, if not more. So it was silver and black, like yin yang, very distinctive coloring. Now that gap between the bluestone circle and the lintel stone circle corresponds to a mathematical ratio that corresponds to a musical interval. And that musical interval is the major third. What does that mean? The major third is used in all ancient Gothic cathedrals and churches throughout medieval Europe because it will raise your emotional consciousness on high, and that is naturally being generated at places like Stonehenge. When Beethoven was writing his music, if he said to the audience, I'm going to play in A major flat, the audience would instantly know, oh, that's the key of the funeral. This is going to be melancholy and sad. We've lost that understanding of what music means. So, for example, again, back in that era of Beethoven, Mozart fame, if they said they were going to play in B minor flat, for example, it would go, oh, that's the spooky sound of the ghosts. That's the music of the demons. Do you see what I mean? So they knew what these musical intervals meant, and that's always at Egypt. I've decoded the ones at Egypt in Hathor's temple. I've looked and decoded at major sites worldwide, and certain keys prevail. For example, Stonehenge shares the major third as its major musical harmonic as the Sphinx temple that stands in front of the Sphinx of ancient Egypt. So they have certain frequencies of music that prevailed throughout the ancient world. So we're looking at an ancient site that can influence our consciousness through its musical ratios, through its earth energies, through its architecture. It's not just one thing. Do you see what I mean? It's a combination of numerous disciplines that make an ancient site sacred.
Yeah. And how you put it into perspective is with great clarity too, because you gave definition of many things as you went through it. And as you said, when you get into some of these sacred churches and so forth, and using different frequencies and tones and sounds, they understood how to elevate from them or to de-elevate whatever they were doing. It's like they could practice positivity, and maybe on another side note, they could practice negativity depending upon what the purpose was for. It's just mind-blowing, because the truth of the matter is, then you when you get into the Masonic and things like that, and 33 RPM, and you get into the certain significance of numbers, and all that is still being used. It's just hidden, but it's being used, and they dismantle knowledge by creating disinformation to accompany it and to keep people lost from it. So you gave a very detailed, great explanation to that, and it opens my mind more with that on how you think. If you don't mind, for a minute, I want to backstep a second, because I listen to a lot of people speak, and I know a lot of people copy people's informations, but don't truly do work in that. But I trust that you do, because I've listened to you, and again, it's such a privilege to be with you. These altar stones, that I think it was you that spoke about them, and I think you called out to the world, and I thank you for doing it. Said demanding in a way. Where are these things? But what do we know what they could have possibly been used for? As healing beds or sacrificial? Or are we looking at?
No, they were originally upright. Today they've fallen over and are called altar stones. So at Stonehenge, originally there were two altar stones. I mean, this is very controversial. I got all evidence for it, incidentally, through ancient antiquarian reports. So they weren't flat. They were originally
Upright.
upright, and they became a recumbent, falling down over the years. So yes, there was two originally at Stonehenge. And just before we talk about something else, just going back to the music, for example, the Masons' music is always in E flat major. That's because it's said to be the devotion of God, getting close to a higher being. So
Right.
all of their music are in that key.
Okay.
Yeah. And some ancient sites are. So yes, the altar stones were originally upright.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Did they have the same types of purposes, though, as that I brought up, do you think? Or were they actually reused as like a, I'm at a loss for the word that I want, but a way to pull from the atmosphere energies, so to speak, by how it was built and the fact that we know stones are like computers and things are used in mysterious ways and jewels and watches and all these significance because they are significant. People don't realize it.
And in my book, I point out the secret properties of standing stones. For example, Dr. Don Robbins, many years ago, he was an archaeologist that became quite famous because he found a mummified body in a bog, the Bogman, and he became famous for that. But he also looked into the properties of stone, which my late father and myself have as well. And if you imagine that a standing stone has a crystal lattice that is near enough identical to a man-made semiconductor coming out of Silicon Valley, yeah, that can hold memory and many things besides. But let's just focus on memory. And you start to program that stone by literally working it. I mean, all the stones at Stonehenge were worked. Archaeologists call them dressed because they're made into a lozenge shape. Okay. Now, Dr. Don Robbins suggested that by doing that dressing, which you would use a stone to dress it, you can't use metal, it would blunt it, because Sarsing's stone of Stonehenge fame is very hard, a bit like granite, for example. It isn't granite, it's a form of sandstone, but it's similar to that. And then you can program a stone in a particular way. Now, what I think some of the stones at Stonehenge were being programmed for was for healing, but also for oracle. There's a very strange ancient story, legend, myth about Stonehenge that every winter solstice, the healing god or the sun god Apollo appears at Stonehenge. He occupies Stonehenge. All ancient texts say he manifested at Stonehenge. Okay, he left Delphi in Greece. He manifests at Stonehenge. Now, if you program stone like you would a semiconductor, many researchers such as myself and Dr. Don Robbins say you could get a corner of the eye fleeting image being released by that stone, which many people have seen, myself included, at Stonehenge. It's like a corner of the eye. You know, it's like a shadowy figure, so to speak. Now, I tried to track Don Robbins down because my late father was a part of the later workings of a stone circle decodement, and Don Robbins had been working on that. And I got in touch with another author and said, I can't really find anything about him on the internet. He said, that's because he just disappeared one day. So he was looking into all of this property. And again, I've got some of this in my legacy archive that I've released in this book. So there's many more things about stones that we really don't understand, but we do know that they can hold on to these musical harmonics, that when you plant a stone into earth energy, and I proved this 15 years ago with a member of the Dragon Project, Rodney Hale, when you put a standing stone into earth energy, it starts to have energy bands. Imagine the stone is releasing energy at 5 points above ground, 2 of which below. We recorded them, electromagnetic. Each place I doused and said, that's where the energy band is. That's where we got the recording. So what's going on there? The standing stone is absorbing, we suggest and hypothesize, that is absorbing the earth energy and then releasing it, because we were picking up aerial energy being released by that standing stone. And as I've always called it, That's Neolithic Wi-Fi. It's releasing a signal with no wires. So did the ancients, were they able to hear these frequencies? Were they be able to see them on a different level? We think that the ancients had the same perception at a stone circle as we do today. I think that's so far removed from their reality of what they were experiencing. Do you see what I mean? I don't think as we enter a stone circle, that's how they would. And also, we must realize that places like Stonehenge and many other sites across the Americas as well, and Mexico and Egypt, they're ruinous. And even though they're ruinous, we still pick up, get healing, get different experiences at a ruinous site. Imagine what it would be like pristine.
Well, yeah, you put an immense amount of perspective on that, and I'm still digesting here. It's like, but it's impressive in a good way. And almost this, like, when we hear that something could just appear, it's almost like, okay, people walked into this area, and we know that they had opioids, or like an early DMT kind of like thing, and then we almost can look at it like the Philadelphia Project or Pegasus, a jump room of being able to transmit power or thought or energies to other vastness or other areas on this planet. And just by utilizing and knowing and having the understanding that stones could accompany that to make it become possible. And I'd look at it as, okay, if we theorize that way and all the hypotheses come out that way, there's still a conundrum of like, how did these people even get wind that all these things were possible when we look at everything that we have been so-called taught? Because we've been suppressed on much of the information, of course. It's like, here we had megalithic structures standing in many parts of the world. But if you went through Oklahoma or Texas in the 1800s, people were still living in wooden shacks with horse and buggy that had no clue that a structure like this ever stood. And people went through their entire lives never knowing that structures like this, and castles and synagogues and all these different things were in existence. It's just mind-blowing that it's almost like, in a way, there were teachers, and was the connection from above, and is that the relevance? That's just a scenario of thought that I come up with, like, because they were looking for something bigger, as well as health and the awareness of survival, and as we talked about, energy and seeds and certain times of year and certain frequencies and ley lines and vibrations. And you're a mindful of good thought. You'll have my mind going into the entire day after this is over. And I'll put myself in one of those places, which maybe you might have as well. When you're done doing a show or one of your TV things and all these great things that you do, at the end of it, do you ever say to yourself, I wish I would have said this? Have you ever had those moments?
Well, I think each show and each interview is different. So you get different things from different shows. But what I always think, that the ancients were highly sensitive. They had such great, immense knowledge that we are only just beginning to understand. And when I've been to a lot of ancient sites in America, I'm leading a tour to Chaco Canyon on August the 27th and the 28th. It's on my website. Even when we look to Chaco Canyon, what they call the Great North Road, it's a huge lay that goes way up to Aztec ruins and all the way down south towards Mexico and Pacume. And the structures there were immense. I mean, in Chaco, you have Pueblo Bonito. It had over 800 rooms and was probably 4 stories high. I mean, it was a huge, huge structure, and it was a part of 12 great houses that now American archaeologists are realizing they're not great houses, they're great temples. And so they're being now redefined in their status. And why Chaco Canyon? It's got no water. It's not very good for growing things. You have to travel to Farmington. That's why it's called Farmington, because it's very good for agricultural purposes. But no, it was the energies. It was the earth energies at Chaco Canyon, Pueblo Bonito, that the ancients chose. So even in ancient America that I have doused, they were laid out in a similar manner with a ley and with earth currents and with many other different energies beside that can change our consciousness. Now at Pueblo Bonito, with 4 stories, you're talking about en masse people, okay, en masse.
Yeah.
Then you're talking at Avebury Henge, the world's largest stone circle, which is literally 15 minutes away from where I live. So I live close to the world's largest stone circle. En masse, you could have 2,000 people stand within those stone circles. So we're not talking about a small priesthood here. You know, you're talking about vast people coming from all over the known other ancient civilizations from other known parts in the ancient world, congregating at places like Stonehenge, Avebury, and many other places besides, such as Chaco Canyon, Cahokia in Illinois, for instance.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think I did catch, I'm not sure, but I think I am. I think you did some type of live rail from Chaco Canyon, giving a little bit of a description. My memory is not.
Yes, I did a little kind of fast blast, so to speak, because ancient America, like places like Chaco and Cahokia, I was only at Cahokia last year. I'd been there with my family many moons ago, and I returned. And that the base of the platform mound called Monk's Mound at Cahokia has the same, near enough the same dimensions as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. It's not as tall as the Great Pyramid in Egypt, but it shares the dimensions near enough of its base. I mean, and that's remarkable. And that too aligns to this major lunar cycle that we're coming up to now, where all of the ancient sites will be activated, especially next year, round about April, October, and a few more months besides. And they will literally be in alignment to that moon, and all of the earth energies below start to respond as above and so below. They start to respond. And this is a time when we can expand our consciousness at places that are sacred to our ancestors old.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, when you calculate the enormity of the pyramid and how things match up. And a lot of things correlate to that, though. They were not just copied from it, but they were built from it. And I think even as time passed from that ancient period and jumped forward through the Bronze Age and more, and then you see how different layers of different other cultures moved in and built over certain, but always kept that foundation. As if that oil, corn, and water at the cornerstone meant a lot everywhere on the entirety of the planet. If anybody doesn't understand what I just said, it's kind of a Masonic ritual, if I'm not mistaken, that was practiced a lot. But yeah, so it signifies a lot, and everything is in a pyramid or a triangle, and everybody talks about them. It seems that the earth is just covered everywhere with them and these places. Understanding them the way that you understand them probably guides you in a very good and on a very well path because of the knowledge that you place. But most people that want to get into this, I highly recommend that you do whatever you can to look up Maria Wheatley right here and follow her and join to her websites and some of her other things that she's done, and watch some of her videos and try to get the best. If you want the best information in the world from the UK, this is the renowned person to go. This is the one to ask the questions to, and she will answer them. If you watch her shows, you'll find out that she will. So I just wanted to throw that in there as much as I can. Also, you have a great getting to your books. What started you into your first book?
My first book was about the world's largest stone circle at Avebury Henge, because it's not so well excavated as Stonehenge, it's not so widely known, and I wanted to put it on the map. It's now a bestseller, incidentally, Avebury, Sun, Moon and Earth Energies, where I went out to prove that these energies existed with the team. So I would say, I'm dousing this, let's put copper probes in the ground, let's get to see, let's have a control area and let's see what's going on. So it was investigating what I claimed. So I was going to either look pretty good or I was going to look pretty bad and be disproved. But it all worked in my favor. And recently, for my latest book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, a retired engineer came out with me to Silbury Hill. Those that don't know Silbury Hill, it's quite close to the world's largest stone circle that I've just mentioned, Avebury. Originally, it was a white chalk mound, but beneath that, it was like a step pyramid at Saqqara in ancient Egypt. But imagine that step pyramid being rounded off. We did some tests on the electrostatic field at the top and towards the bottom in a control, mainly inspired by the work of John Burke. And I thought, well, Burke went back then, he got those results. I wonder if we'll get anything better, get anything worse, get the same. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. We got it 10 times greater in a more of a wet period. It was February. And with the measurements at the bottom, it was 1,000 times greater from the control to the top. Now, this engineer calculated that if indeed that is the case, and we got the results, I published them in my book, we got the results, then with the whiteness of the mound and the electrostatic fields beginning to discharge at night, there would have been a blue haze across the top of these ancient mounds. Now, quite close to, it's West Virginia, I think it's in, you have Grave Creek Mound, said to be created by the Adena ancient culture there. That's almost identical to Silbury Hill. And I think these ancient mounds could light up the dark. Like I said, we got the facts. We got you the measurements. We just looked at it, not for necessarily for charge and siege, which I think it did as a secondary thing, as in the case of John Burke, because it's got a geospiral that I said is the earth energy that charges siege, but releases light. Could you imagine coming to an ancient site at night and seeing this massive 130-foot high monument glowing in the dark? And the reason why it would glow in the dark is a bit like how the pyramids were said to be finished off. They were capped in gold. And one writer says there could have been a little bit of an antennae coming up, or a large piece of gold like that, like at the top of the pyramid. At Silbury Hill, if you had a piece of copper or a piece of gold, it was a Chalcolithic period. That means the Copper Age. So let's go without so much bling as the Great Pyramid. It's got some copper coming up. That's what would attract the electrostatic field and start to release it.
Wow, interesting. Because I never thought about a glowing, kind of like Keller radiating from it. And it kind of like, then when I immediately started thinking in my mind, Tesla was going after the same type of objective. And maybe John Burke was actually finding out or was researching a little bit on him to better his future of understanding of how to prove the facts of what has been proven and what he has written about. And you inherited this as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean that was our own discoveries at Silbury Hill, but I have inherited a lot of earth energy surveys, and I know how to survey. I know how to decode land. So how I see the vision for the future, because we've talked a lot about the ancient past,
Okay, let's go to the future.
Yeah, so how I see the future, if you've got some virgin land, for example, and you're going to build something, if you know which earth energies prevail there, like let's say, for example, you've got a female earth current, that would be a great place to relax. And if you've got a male earth current, that's more invigorating. That would be a good place to recuperate or get some energy from. If you've got particular types of lays or grid systems, you can start to say, especially if it's a hospital or something, that would be good for that department. That would be good for that department. Do you see what I mean? I think you can build up an understanding. And like I said, I looked to the Bronze Age farming techniques because I said earlier there was a template, but I was studying at Oxford University and I realized the Bronze Age kept repeating and repeating and repeating a pattern in their farming communities. Well, you only repeat a pattern if it works. You're not going to repeat something if it doesn't work. It's not going to be of practicality. And so I looked to that and I decoded that and have written about it in the book. So I see earth energies as being a part of our future as much as they were a part of the past.
Yeah, and I kind of always reflect, if you want the answers for the future, go to the past and do your homework. Something that I always said that I believed in, because through much of the lockdown and different things, a lot of people were at home and so forth, and a lot of social anxieties were high. People were questioning things, and I think history has always had so many questions, and so many civilizations have lived through so many different things of a likeness. I was trying to just merely set a reference point of, if you want the truth, research the past and let it come forth. Let that be part of your guide and your learning experience. And as well, I would try to post things that, like comments that you may have made or short reels that were available, and try to influence people to guide them. Because again, as I, like you, I believe we're going to have to rely hugely into the future. And I'm not saying that I know why. I'm not referencing anything that's of a cataclysm, but we know the earth has had them. But we may have to go back to a sticks and stone theory of networking. I mean, the possibility may or may not be factual, and I don't want to promote anything that I can't articulate on, but I do want to just give the most that I can. That's why I love what you do and how you explain yourself in this. As we jumped into the future, I want to take you back to the past, because it was something that I'm trying to get more of a different visual on, as far as for myself. So this is for where I am as a person. You talk about the factor of spiritual holes, and then I look at like from the past, and then I see the indigenous who practice the spiritual dream catchers and things like that. Is there a correlation of how the past may have got changed a little bit, but it's still one and the same as spiritual holes when they are being done and supplied into megastructures and so forth?
The ancient Neolithic and Bronze Age and Iron Age peoples did not write anything down. They were a bardic people. So the only conquerors that wrote down what the Druids were doing, they were in the Iron Age. Imagine that the megalithic building period suddenly became an end. It ended very abruptly, actually, in about 1100 BC. And then the Druids took over from the spirituality of the previous culture, the Bronze Age peoples, and they had their own types of monuments, for example. So it was when they were being conquered by the Romans that the Romans started to write things down about this really mysterious culture, spiritual culture that inhabited the British Isles. And what they said was they were the masters of nature. That was one thing they kept repeating. They would only pick mistletoe at particular times of the year that interestingly equate to the changeover of energy in earth energy. So for spirals going one way, 6 days after a new or full moon, like I said earlier, it would go in the opposite direction. And that's when the Druids would take the mistletoe, cut it down. Now, also, you were mentioning educational systems earlier. The Druids had what's called cores, CORS. S. And a corps is a college. And so one of the most famous colleges was at Oxford University, or was at Oxford rather, that became Oxford University. So they had all of these corps around the place. You had to study to be a Druid for over 20 years and then study for further 3 to get your doctorate. And that's where we get the 3-year degree program from today, from the ancient Druid peoples. And so there was nothing really written down, but what we do know is certain spiritual practices were done at particular times of the year, such as Beltane, May the 1st, Lammas, August the 1st. Their new year started at Samhain, which became Christianized to Halloween. That's when the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and you can speak to your ancestors, and people still dress up as skeletons, reflecting that pagan tradition. So we do know some of the spiritualities. We do know some of the ancient spells and incantations that were being used, which modern day Druids, such as myself, reenact. Whether we've got it 100% right, no, I don't think it's 100% right, but I think we've got some main ingredients of the spirituality of the past.
Yeah. And so paganism, do you think that was labeled as a positive or a negative because of what they knew and the knowledge that was behind them? That was it truly respect or being disrespected?
In ancient times, it was a way of life. It was just the way things were. And it wasn't really until Christianity came to the shores that monuments were starting to be destroyed by the Christians and replaced by churches, and maybe even some of the standing stones used in the church structures is quite a common practice. So it was almost like there was a new religion coming in that became the way to do things. Why? Because, you know, people have this image of abbots and at places like Glastonbury Abbey and all of these old cathedrals. If you weren't a Christian, you couldn't trade. So people became Christians because they knew if I can't trade with you in your abbey, then I'm out on a limb. So a lot of people became abbots and things because it put them in good stead for commercial viability. Money always talks, no matter what era you are in.
I know. It's just making me think about when I do my platform American Crisis, and I see all these things being laid out as going into the past and bringing them into the present. I mean, it was a forced compliance in a certain way. You went with the game, or you had no game, or live or die, survival of the fittest. I mean, basically. We've always been surrounded by those things, and I'm not trying to laugh about it. It's sad in a way that there can't be a more free spirit, because I think life itself should be a free spirit, the right to breathe and live and experience and love and understand our bodies as temples, because we are the true temple. We are the creators. Whatever creation was or why it had happened. Earth itself became a creator when we became a creator within it. We were able to reproduce and with that objective to grow and to learn and to become more viable and to experience different things and of knowledge and so forth. And if a seed falls from a tree because they pollinated, they did their job, you know, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. We are in the world of creation. I love it. And I love finding all the answers that we can. We're just a little bit over an hour, and I know you had an earlier event that you did. So not to hold up your day, but to thank you for coming in today. And I could sit with you and listen to you forever. I really could. And maybe one day we'll be able to land back on that and do that. But for people to get in touch with you, how would you like for that to be shared as far as your sites?
Yeah, absolutely. People can get in touch with me through my websites. My teaching platform for dowsing courses and many other courses besides is esotericcollege.com. So you can go there for my teaching platform. My tours, such as Charco Canyon and Stonehenge. I've got some really exciting tours next year, 2025, where the moon's alignment is only happening every 18.61 years. I'm going to take you there. I'm going to take you to ancient sites and find out about those at the Avebury. That's AVEBURY, the Avebury Experience.co.uk. That's my tours and workshops as well. And if you can't remember any of those, just go to mariawheatley.uk. I'm a Brit, mariawheatley.uk, and it will take you to both sites anyway.
I'm writing some of that down too. I really am. I'll make up a little thing and I'll put it in America Disclosing Uncensored. And I hope America got disclosed to some very good information today. It's why I always wanted that group to be as it is and to thrive that the way it is, so we could get answers into the unknown and the unexplained. One, I think I may have asked you this though, but just in case not, and you can remind me, because I'm getting a little older here. I'm not young like you are. But as a joke, has any one particular place, besides knowing that you live close to something that you could investigate in a heartbeat, and now going to Chaco Canyon and understanding a different perspective there, has any one particular place been your favorite of all, where you think you have unveiled the most secrets?
Oh God, that's an amazing question. But oh my goodness, I have to choose. I have to
Yes,
choose
I'm
between.
sorry I put you there. I wanted to be a
Well,
good host, a guy, a kind of like question guy, even though I'm not.
Well, I've done 16 different countries and hundreds and hundreds of monuments. So my favorites would be places like Stonehenge, the pyramids, Hathor's temple, but also some maybe strange places like an alleged Sphinx in Transylvania.
Ooh,
So I've got lots of kind of different sites that I love and adore, because they are all so unique. And also another site in Transylvania, Bran's Castle, the inspiration of Dracula, has some very strange but empowering energies there. So, oh my goodness, I've got castles, I could say. I've got ancient sites. But
if
yes.
you need a bag carrier, I'll be more than happy to stand by and, you know. But yeah, funny thing you brought up Dracula. I was reading something. I don't know how true this is, but we'll just say there's some representation to a king right now that's living in Dracula's castle. He's moving there. I don't know if that's true, but I just thought I'd throw that in as an ending there to it. Maybe it's totally false. I don't know. We see so much disinformation and planted information and stuff of confusion. Here, you don't get that. I really try to represent the best in the world that we can, that are willing enough to come on. And again, I applaud you in front of the world for all of your work.
Oh, thank you.
And in the green room, we had a little bit of a discussion. I want you to know I am all for what you stand for and who you are. And I'm heartbroken in a way that you have to deal with some of this bad significance, that a vibration that goes on in the world. And if you ever need any support here from me in any way or something, or you want me to post some things out for you and get them shared, I'll be more than happy to.
Oh, thank you. That's incredible. Thank you very much indeed.
Happy to. And again, thank you so much for being here. You've been a gracious guest with a lot of information. I'm going to recommend to anybody, if you missed any of this, I did pretty good today. So you guys who follow me, and there's thousands of you out there that do time and time again, check it out from the beginning. Don't miss the entirety of this show. Maria Wheatley, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And every time I see you on TV, I'm going to say, I talked with her. Thank you for doing that for me. And also special thanks to Dennis Stone.
Yes.
New Hampshire. And you're going to be there next year, correct?
Yes, I will be with Dennis Stone, very knowledgeable about America's Stonehenge, and I'll be there hopefully sort of early May, May the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, interacting with the earth energies there, decoding the site, and being in a beautiful ancient site in a wonderful part of the world.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're going to meet Michael Anthony that day. I'm
I hope so.
serious. It'd be so. And who knows? Maybe some other people might show up. I was hearing an earlier vibe about some other people. This could turn out to be some kind of picnic. I'm not joking on that. So I'm going to look forward to it. I'm going to mark it into my calendar now for me not to do nothing and take the car out of the garage and never drive and head somewhere. I do need that. Plus, Dennis has shared so many remarkable pictures with me, and I like to get a better up close standing on what they are, and you would probably be the best person to tell me what this is, because I know you'd be able to explain it. But anyway, you have a wonderful day, and I most appreciated your time, and I thank you for it. And for all you guys out there, again, Maria Wheatley, please look into her, follow her. If there's anything out there, stay close, stay in tune, stay in touch. She's the one with the answers. I promise you, you won't regret that, me saying that. Until next time, this is Michael Anthony with America Disclosing Uncensored. What an enjoyable day. Thank you for making my day, Maria. I appreciate it. You all have a great evening. Take care, guys. And please share everywhere from Maria.